Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. We know many of you have already been getting your flower gardens in order. Now it's time to put in your veggies and maybe using seeds from last year's crop. In recent years, there's been a renewed interest in seed saving. The garden center will always have seeds to sell. But what if you have a favorite recipe that requires a specific kind of onion, or you just like the taste of a certain type of tomato? What then? At the University of Vermont's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, researchers work side by side with seed savers to perfect the most vigorous varieties of peas, and also to preserve seeds grown for centuries by indigenous people. Across the Fence's Keith Silva digs into this story.
This is what you might call down and dirty science.
I love being dirty. I might get in trouble when I head home, but I love being down in the dirt.
Eric von Wetberg studies plant genetics in the Plant and Soil Science Department at the University of Vermont.
Being here at UVM is honestly my dream job. Since I first visited Vermont, I've wanted to work here. I get to do all sorts of different things. I get to do everything from plant my own peas to think about the origin of farming and civilization, from down in the dirt to pie in the sky.
The experiment that has von Wetberg digging in the dirt deals with diversity, one pea at a time.
Diversity is a hedge against bad things happening. A farmer's productivity rests on their soil. The best way to protect the soil is to keep things growing on it. Here in Vermont, we can do that in the summer fairly easily, but in the winter, if we have growing vegetation, a cover crop over the winter, we can protect the soil through the winter.
Planting cover crops like wheat and rye in the fall prevents soil erosion and nutrient runoff. Adding peas to the crop mix provides a nitrogen source, which cuts down on fertilizer costs come spring. There's only one problem. Most pea varieties can't tolerate a Vermont winter. Notice I said most.
Our aim in this experiment is to help develop winter-tolerant pea varieties. In this trial, we are using a number of varieties that have been saved by farmers in the Dakotas, Montana, Washington State, as well as by my own students here, and we're seeing which of them do best.
This experiment goes beyond picking the perfect pea. Von Wetberg also wants to know which variety packs the biggest nutrient punch, what he calls the mechanism.
That's right. One of the things that I'm most interested in is how the climate and the agricultural system where varieties came from impacts the genetic diversity we see. In addition, as a researcher, part of what I think about is mechanism. Understanding the mechanism by which they give back to the soil. Keeping the soil covered is part of that. In modern breeding, because we're so focused on yield, we've overlooked what the crop is putting back into the soil. So by working with seed savers, we can assemble that diversity and look to see how it in turn impacts the soil and the subsequent crop. This one rolls off the tongue, PS113024W.
The peas in this experiment aren't any off-the-shelf garden variety. They've been selected, bred, and saved over generations by researchers like von Wetberg and by people like Sylvia DeVatz.
Pineapple fog. It's my new favorite this year.
A lifelong gardener, DeVatz began saving seeds out of necessity.
I had a backyard where I grew tomatoes, and I had an asparagus patch and raspberries and all sorts of things. But I began to notice that some of my favorite varieties were disappearing from the seed catalogs, and I found this really alarming. And so that was one thing that sparked my interest in getting started.
Seed saving dates back to the dawn of human civilization. It's only within the last 100 years that this practice began to go out of style as agriculture became more commercialized and corporatized. For Devats, seed saving is a bridge between agriculture's past and its future.
All of those generations of farmers who came before us, for whom seed saving was a natural part of the growing cycle. Nobody didn't save seed. If you farmed, you saved seed. You needed it for yourself. You needed it to share with others in your community. And so I don't consider myself anything more than an agent or a steward. These seeds came to me from generations of people who saved them and preserved them and developed them. It's my job to keep them alive so that they are available for future generations. As you can see, the little capsules are opening up here.
Devats began saving seeds for von Wetberg in order to preserve crops considered too niche for commercial seed suppliers. Crops like the Vermont Hubbard squash. Preserving these unique varieties of vegetables plants a seed, so to speak, for future generations.
Some of us who are seed savers who've been doing this for decades are getting older, and we need to find a way, first of all, to pass our knowledge on to others, to pass our collections on to others, and to make sure that all of this work and everything that we have worked so hard to preserve and keep alive and maintain, that it doesn't end with our generation.
At his lab, von Wetberg is surrounded by seeds. There are seeds drying on the windowsill, and seeds sealed in plastic packets and paper envelopes. And still more seeds frozen for safekeeping.
Freezing seeds is not ideal. Ultimately, a seed is a living artifact, and when we put them in a freezer, we're perhaps moving away from the culture that went with the seeds. Part of what we do as researchers is provide a stopgap. As a teacher, a large part of what I try to do in my crop breeding course is teach applied seed saving so that there's a generation to follow Sylvia and other seed savers here in the Northeast.
Each seed that's being preserved here represents a legacy, gifts that will continue to give and grow for generations to come.
It is amazing to work with seed savers because the insights they have, the diversity that they've preserved are stunning. It's a pleasure to be a part of the farming community in Vermont. We have such a unique landscape and agricultural heritage. You know, it's fun to understand it, or try to understand it.
In the lab or out in the field, seeds are an investment in the future. And that's something worth saving. In Burlington, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Thanks, Keith. If planting a garden is a sure sign of spring, so too is flooding. Development has caused many Vermont waterways to become disconnected from their floodplains. In this video produced by the Lake Champlain Basin Program, we learn how town officials, engineers, and researchers at UVM work together to turn a disaster zone into a public park that preserves and protects Vermont's natural resources.
We're at the Dog River Park in Northfield. There was an opportunity to do floodplain restoration here, as well as creating a public park.
The river used to come up and flood the neighborhood, and now when the flood occurs, it floods the field first and lessens the extended damage in the neighborhood.
In the spring, in 2011, the homes on this street were flooded. A lot of folks lost utilities like their boiler, their circuit box, that kind of thing. And so we identified those as an opportunity for acquisition and demolition in the future. In August of 2011, those same homes along Water Street were flooded for a second time. And the homeowners came to the town and said, "We don't want to be here anymore." The town had anticipated that and said, "All right, let's get started."
Over the next 5 years, the town worked with residents and FEMA to buy out and demolish 13 homes, helping to restore the natural floodplain to the Dog River.
We looked at the area, did a geomorphic assessment of the river, other data collection. We created a hydraulic model and tested different alternatives, settled on floodplain restoration.
Providing space for rivers to spread out during rainstorms helps reduce the impact to communities and achieve the goals of the Lake Champlain Phosphorus TMDL.
The river experienced a 2-year flood this year, and it spread out into the field just like it's supposed to. It dropped sediment just like it's supposed to, and I'm really happy with it because it shows that the restored floodplain is functioning exactly the way that we had hoped. Given the opportunity to slow down, lose its sediment load, it will be doing less damage downstream. It will also be carrying less sediment to Lake Champlain. It will be carrying fewer nutrients to Lake Champlain. Nutrients like phosphorus stick to the sediment in the water. That phosphorus feeds algae blooms. So we want to see the phosphorus stay where it belongs in the fields and in the stream banks.
Floodplain restoration is considered to be a cost-effective solution to water pollution challenges. Scientists are using the Dog River Park flood to learn more about the role floodplains play in reducing pollution.
So this research is trying to quantify the functioning of floodplains, and by that I mean what's the capacity of a floodplain to retain sediment and nutrients, and specifically we're looking at phosphorus during flood events. We can get a really good estimate of phosphorus deposited on floodplains by sampling sediment because there's a portion of phosphorus that sorbs onto particles. We take a soil core, identify the depth of sediment deposited, so then we can translate a depth into a mass, and we analyze it for the total phosphorus that's associated with that sediment deposited on the floodplain. We determined that it was approximately 300 pounds of phosphorus were deposited there. It's great to see these floodplains, again, functioning as they need to, capturing sediment and the associated nutrients before they go downstream.
One thing that this project shows is the value of ecological restoration, restoring nature to function the way that it should, and the value of doing that kind of a solution to lead to clean water. And it's a public park where people get to enjoy spending time with their friends and family.
To see more videos in this series and learn how Vermont communities are making a commitment to clean water, visit www.cleanwaterwork.com. And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.